Hello and welcome to Beacon Hill Update. I'm your host Jody Garcon, and thank you to Millis Community Media for working to provide us in Millis with this opportunity to hear from our representatives each quarter. Today's update is with Representative James Arena-DeRosa of Holliston. He's a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and he serves the 8th Middlesex District, consisting of the towns of Holliston, Hopkinton, and Sherborne, all in Middlesex County, and precincts 2 and 3 in Millis. And those are in Norfolk County. He has been our representative since 2022. Today's program is taped on April 22nd, 2026, and we will focus on our continuing struggle for utility relief for ratepayers and where things stand now that we are officially in spring, although today is a little chilly and dark. Next, we'll discuss immigration and customs enforcement in Massachusetts and the governor's proposal for how and where ICE operates. We'll also discuss any updates on federal funding cuts, such as education and medical research here in Massachusetts. And finally, we'll hear from Representative Arena-DeRosa about the legislation he is currently working on, any other important updates from the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Representative Arena-DeRosa, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Great to be back. Sorry I had to postpone with RSV. Everyone should get their shot if they're over 60, if they so choose. I wish I had done that. So anyway, I'm going to do it soon. So.
It's been a rough winter.
Oh, geez. It never ends. It just lingers. So appreciate your patience and coming
No
back.
worries. Let's start with any updates on what the legislature is doing about the cost of gas and electricity in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, we're trying. And I'm afraid to open my own utility bill, right? It's out of control. A couple things just for background, though. Some of it is geography. I mean, just all the New England states, our rates are 40% higher since 2020. And even New Hampshire, which is kind of known as, more conservative, they don't want to pay taxes, don't want to do energy savings. Even their rates are 50% higher than the whole country. So some of it is just where we are, which is why things like, increasing, solar and hydroelectric and all these different opportunities that can help boost and get more energy to us will be helpful in the long term. What was interesting was when the rates went way up last year, the utilities kind of sold this narrative of, it's because of Mass Save. And it was a little disingenuous because it's about 15% of our bills. And we should debate that 15%. And in fact, that we have some things that we've done around that. But that's not the huge part of the bill. And some people send me their bills. I'm like, do you realize that half your bill it's this GSEP program? It was put in place so that we would fix leaky pipes. Now, I think it's important. We certainly want to fix leaky pipes. I don't have a problem with that. And when the program was pitched, and it was a collaboration between the government and the utilities, it was pitched as it's going to cost ratepayers about $4 or $5 a month. Well, that's reasonable for us to have to say, I don't have a problem with that. Well, now it is like this cash cow that the utilities run. They get a 10% guaranteed profit. It's up to 50% of people's bills, and there's very little oversight. You want to tell me you've got 5 miles of old pipe and there's 20 leaks, fix the whole 5 miles. I have no problem. Fix the whole 5 miles. You have 5 miles of pipe with 2 leaks, let's fix the 2 leaks. And there's no real oversight. DPU is now going to investigate the entire program. They're going to look at appropriate oversight. They're going to look at what we need to do. I actually have legislation that's in play that I'm going to put in next time that's going to say, I certainly want us to still have that program. Let's go back to the $4 to $5 a month, not these huge amounts that people are paying, so that would help. On the Mass Save front, we did cut $1 billion from the budget that will save. It'll give a little bit of rate relief to people. And I know some people didn't want us to cut that. They were like, it's a great program. The problem with the program is, and I've had great success in my own home with Mass Save, wonderful contractors around here, no problems. But in other parts of the state, because it's a decentralized program that's run by the utilities, it's kind of catch as catch can, whether or not they're reliable contractors, do people get their rebates. So there's actually going to be an IG review of the entire program. The other thing that was a little startling to some of us is this is a program that the overhead rate is 38%.
Exactly.
38% for advertising and administration. So where's that money going? That's a lot of money. I mean, for a couple billion, I mean, it's almost half of the program money. Now, there were debates about how to deal with it. I actually supported an amendment. We didn't get enough votes for it, which would say, all right, we're going to preserve the program funding, the money that goes to consumers, the money that goes to our local businesses. We're going to keep that the same, and then we're going to hold up $1 billion back from the advertising and overhead. But that didn't quite get through. But so it's all going to be lumped together. It should give some rate relief. More important, give some long-term sort of look at the entire program. But there's still challenges, and we've got to make more investments. And it took us years to get into this. It's going to take us years to get out of it. So hopefully we'll get a little rate relief in the short term and see what we can do. And I think, look, I want us to continue to make progress toward a clean energy future, but we have to use common sense, and we have to be pragmatic when some regulations, I'll give you an example if it's all right, the new EV truck regulations, and I got calls from people who plow our local streets and like, James, the regs want us to buy these trucks, but batteries don't last more than 4 hours.
Right.
In New England, snowstorms 10, 12. So we talked to them, and now they're exempt from it for now, emergency relief. I had someone else, a local business, he said, James, they don't even make trucks for my business that I can, an EV, what am I supposed to do? So again, we did exemptions. So there's a lot of well-intentioned rules that sometimes we don't look at the long-term impacts or don't look at pragmatic solutions. I do think we have to keep moving forward, but we have to do it in a way that makes smart. And I'm hopeful, it's too bad that the wind got cut from the federal government and other things. There was real potential there. We're going to keep going, but it's going to be slower because we didn't get the huge subsidies. I think we also have to look at geothermal long-term as well. So it'll be interesting. So we're in it for a while. We're trying to do our part, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, on that front, are there programs that the state is helping to promote for geothermal? I know that Framingham has been doing some work on geothermal, and it's something I've been excited about for a while.
If you want, I want to go visit. So if you want to come with me, no, because it really is an interesting concept, and the more you hear about it, it's a one-time investment, but it's a permanent source.
Exactly.
It's fascinating the way it works, and they go miles now into the ground. I think we're seeing the beginnings of some demonstration projects. I think they need to show a little more success. And of course, the hard thing in politics is I'm a big believer in long-term investments, but politicians, it's often about the moment, right?
Exactly.
So, but if we invest right, it could really save us in the long term. And it's interesting. I've heard about Framingham. I'm like, I want to go take a look at that. So,
interesting.
yeah.
Changing subjects. At the end of January, the governor filed legislation to keep Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also called ICE, from carrying out enforcement actions in and around certain sensitive locations, such as schools, churches, hospitals, and courthouses in Massachusetts. The proposal also aims to ban warrantless civil arrests at courthouses and restricts out-of-state National Guard deployment without her permission. She also signed an executive order that would keep ICE out of non-public areas of state buildings and ban ICE from using state property as staging areas. It would also restrict new 287 agreements that authorize ICE to delegate specific limited enforcement duties to state and local law enforcement officers. And then in mid-March, along with Attorney General Campbell, she also launched a state portal to report ICE misconduct, as she claims to hold ICE accountable and to increase transparency and accountability around federal immigration enforcement in Massachusetts. What are your thoughts on these actions by the governor and as the legislature begins their consideration of this legislation, and how can the state and local law enforcement officers best assist the federal government with targeted enforcements to rid our communities of criminal undocumented immigrants while protecting the rights of all Massachusetts residents and visitors?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a very complex problem and challenge for us. I certainly want to make sure that we are doing appropriate enforcement of those committing serious crimes. I don't know anybody that doesn't, you're gone, deport them. I have no problem with that. When you see the ads, we're going after the worst of the worst. Go after the worst of the worst. That's only about 10%, though, of the people that are arresting. And so a lot of what we're trying to look at is, well, wait, what's really going on here? Like, you're arresting honor students on the way to volleyball practice. I heard from a dentist who they're targeting grandparents that are bringing their grandchildren to dental clinics. People that are taking care of our seniors in homes, a lot of them are immigrants. Some of them may not have the appropriate documentation. I think in this whole arena, we have to be just smarter about how we do it. And just going back a little bit, if I may, I think as Democrats sometimes made mistakes conflating, we can have good border control and control of the situation and still treat people with dignity and respect. I didn't want people in cages, mothers separated from babies. There was some nasty stuff that was going on, which is not right. Doesn't mean you can't have a good process at the border and more enforcement. I'm fine with that. In terms of one of the biggest challenges when we look at this issue is, where is our purview as a state? because there are some things that we can do as a state government. There are some things that are within the federal government. That doesn't absent us from talking about it, but we had to be very careful in the legislation, and some of it still may go to court. All those things you mentioned, I think they're good steps. We're hopeful that it'll hold up in court. We're not sure. The biggest thing for me is, I am really proud of our local law enforcement here, right? We went through this whole process with Post. I mean, I will stand behind any of our local departments. Right? They identify themselves. They have badge numbers. They don't wear masks. Some of them have cameras. Some departments have cameras. I think they comport themselves with great professionalism. Really proud. So I don't feel that way about ICE, but that's still my law enforcement agency. It's a federal agency. I want to be proud of them too. And they need to be held accountable. I think the federal government, the Congress has to do something, and right now we don't have the votes to do that. But I think we may see some changes depending what happens. Doesn't mean they can't still do their work, their appropriate work, but they shouldn't be acting the way. I mean, some of the stuff, they look like armed thugs, and it's really unsettling to me as an American and who believes in our civil rights and things that we should be doing. I want us to make sure that there are just safe spaces to conduct business, whether it's hospitals, schools, courtrooms. I mean, there just have to be places. I mean, I heard of a story where some ICE grabbed people waiting in a food line, people waiting in line for food. So it's like, really? I mean, is that what we've come to? And I think what's interesting is, and I've talked with people across the political spectrum, people a little more conservative, who wanted us to do a better job with immigration. Some of them are like, this is not what I wanted us to do. Right? Even they're like, yeah, I wanted them to get rid of people who shouldn't be here. Part of the problem also is the way we set up our systems. Remember, and the numbers are down in terms of how much we spent a lot of money on the shelter system.
We did.
What I remind people of is every single person in the shelter was here legally. Those were not people that weren't undocumented. They were here legally. That means the United States government, either the Trump 1 or Biden, or now Trump 2, allowed them to come and said, you can come into the United States. But the system is still so flawed in the way it's set up. And I've got some international background in my past work, Peace Corps, Oxfam, and others. And I went to the Trump 1 people. I talked to Biden. I knew some people in the administration. I'm trying to talk to our federal representatives and the Trump administration now. We can debate who gets let into the country, right? At the border, whatever system you want to have. Every administration has that purview. These are the rules. This is who we're going to let in, whatever. That's one debate. But every single person who is allowed into the United States, what do? Welcome to the United States. Here's your paperwork. You're here legally. And then when you go wherever you're going to go, you can figure out work permits and stuff like that. Why do we have a system like that? Why don't we, at the time of entry, welcome to the United States, here's your people, you're here legally, and here's your work permit. So no matter where you go, you can contribute to the community you're going to be part of. You can start to build a life here in America. And I'm not saying that that there's not a drain on resources, because we know it costs us a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But that's not what people would choose. They would much rather be working, getting a house, having a lot, but they can't because they can't work. So that's on us to fix. I mean, it's like, I don't know why that still hasn't been, and all of this still needs to be addressed. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. The overlay to all of it, by the way, is that in Massachusetts, we are 300,000 workers short. Yes. In a lot of entry level, the people who do, whether it's some of the landscaping, some of the taking care of the elderly, some of the food services.
Construction.
We're down a lot of numbers, need people. So again, not that we don't need a thoughtful system, but we should be able to figure it all out. People with respect, get rid of the bad actors who we don't want here, and do it in a way that makes sense. So we'll see. I think there'll be a lot of back and forth in the courts in the months to come, but you and I can catch up on it next time. No, because it's still going to be out there.
Yeah, this isn't going to be solved anytime soon. Yeah. I mean, it's been decades getting to this point, and without comprehensive immigration reform, we're going to keep coming back to the same issues. We've had some questions from folks in Millis who wanted to know how Massachusetts will take action to mitigate federal funding cuts, such as education and medical research in Massachusetts. We saw last year the governor launched the $400 million DRIVE initiative, which is discovery, research, and innovation for a vibrant economy. I had to look that one up. To grow our research and innovation economy and hopefully create new jobs, which is great. But Massachusetts receives, or did receive, more than $8 billion a year in federal research and development funding. What other ways is the legislature acting to ensure that we continue to have strong institutions that are essential to both our state's economy and our reputation as a national leader?
It's a huge challenge for Massachusetts, and one of the things that the Speaker and the Chair of Ways and Means and others are saying on the Senate side too is there's no way we can replace dollar for dollar. We can't.
$8 billion is a lot of money.
It's just, and so that's the starting point. That doesn't mean we can't do some things, because especially around, as you mentioned, we're the lead in some of these industries, and they tend to be some of the ones that this administration has targeted. Education, medical. You look at places where we're leading, and they're sustaining some of the deepest cuts, which is unfortunate. The other thing about the cuts is they come in different ways. You're not going to get your $2 billion to do a new bridge on the Cape. Okay, so we're not going to do the bridge if we don't have our $2 billion. But then we're going to cut this medical research program that's going to help in this area, and that's $100 million. And well, can we find the money? Maybe we can help continue it. But then there were things like around SNAP, and I've got a little bit of background in USDA during Obama in the Northeast, and where they've put in new rules that they're going to punish states that don't fix their error rates. Not that I don't want us to fix our error rates, because we should, but after COVID, things kind of exploded. We wanted to make sure people were eating every day. Now we've got to step back and say, okay, let's fix this system, but give us time to fix it. Don't say the clock has already started and we're going to penalize you $400 million if you don't fix this problem that you have until the end of the year to fix. That's real money. That's a penalty that we are going to have to pay. So part of it is parsing all the different ways these cuts are coming. Is it the lack of something? Is it you're not going to be able to do something? Is it we're going to have to pay? So I think it's again one of these ongoing. We keep sorting through what can we do. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, so we want to put more money into that. I mean, we've just started finally with a bond bill last year. But we've got an environmental bond bill that hopefully is going to go through that's going to help create some jobs as well. I mean, there's areas that the state has been leading on where we may not be able to do as much because we're not going to have as much federal money. We can't replace it all. We're going to have to make some choices along the way. So we'll see how it plays out. But absolutely, there's no way we're going to just match every dollar. We don't have the resource. We have to make choices. And it's always hard when you make choices, especially for ongoing programs that are already in existence.
And for things that are really essential to the Massachusetts economy and keeping, good jobs here, and those jobs lead to have knock-on effects of other jobs that support the people who are here working. So it is it's a concern, particularly for the business community.
Oh yeah, I mean the innovative that economy, money's being put into that. We're still going to try to get them some resources because it drives so much of what goes on here. Technology is part of it, medical is part of it, and we'll see research. I mean, we potential leaders on all these on biotech, but then what we're finding is that we've got the knowledge economy here that's starting it out, and then they're putting plants in other parts of the country to do the actual manufacturing. And I'm like, wait, we should be holding on to that. I've actually had some conversations. I'm old enough to remember when we led the world in high tech. And then we still do really well here, but we lost a lot of that lead to the Silicon Valley. I'm like, what is it that happened? And people said, well, we actually held on to a lot of the knowledge base, but many of the jobs, and then of course a lot of them went overseas eventually. But so I'm hoping in biotech we can be a little more strategic in the way we can hold on to some of those jobs. And one of my pitches is, I know that it's really expensive right downtown, Kendall Square, all in there. You come out here to Hopkinton, our area, you can get reasonable costs for real estate and build here. So we'll see. But it's a concern that we'll keep the knowledge parts and then lose a lot of the jobs in the process. So.
Indeed. So I know right now the legislature is reviewing budgets. So I know we hadn't really queued that up, but I know that's this is budget season now.
I can touch on it, sure.
So can you let us know how that's going?
So first of all, we in the House, we're going to pass a budget that will not increase taxes. I know people are worried about that, especially as real estate taxes go up. We actually passed the biggest tax break statewide in a generation last time around the block. When I was first elected, and the governor would send out, we're going to increase education by 4%. So I'd run and look at all my numbers, and it's like, oh wow, we'll get it. And then they would come, and we don't get that.
Right.
And I'm like, wait, what's going on? So, it's time for us to review the Student Opportunity Act. It's in this last year. I don't mind that we help these really poor, struggling districts. I always say, Millis is not Lowell and Lawrence. We get it. But we're also not Weston and Wellesley either. And when they set up the program, I thought it's flawed in that it didn't sort of do a graduated support system that would say, all right, if you're really struggling, we're going to give you these resources. If you're kind of in the middle, like a Millis, we'll help you a little bit, and then if you're really wealthy, you'll be one of those minimum aid towns.
Right.
Instead, there's several hundred towns that are minimum aid. So in the way the state looks at it, Millis, and I love Millis, great town. I'm not saying it's a poor town, but it's not an extremely wealthy town. It has to look at every dime. And so I'm like, why didn't we take into consideration those towns in the middle? I've got several towns that are in the middle. Hopefully, I know that there's legislation to create another commission. There's an acknowledgement by leadership that we're in the last phase of that. We need to look at it again. I also think we need to continue to do more around special education.
Yeah.
And I say all the time, I want to make sure every kid gets what they need. That's the starting point. But who pays for it? I had people call me from Millis before I was even in office about how the out-of-district SPED costs were going up 14% one year, and then it was almost 20% in 2 years.
Absolutely.
But what do we tell communities? You can only raise your rates 2.5% without
Right.
going to the voters. So I have two things. One, I had legislation to say, the state can't do this with impunity. The state can't say, we're gonna increase your rates by 14 and then 19% in 2 years, but you can only do 2.5%. How about if I say to the state, you raise it 2.5%, that's what gets put on the towns. And then if it's important, I'm not saying to not do it, you figure out within the state budget the rest of the money. It's kind of like a little bit of pushback from that. It's like, oh, how are we going to do it? I'm like, well, that's what you're saying to towns every single day, right? And there's got to be a better way. Now, we're under law, we're supposed to the state is supposed to reimburse cities and towns 75% for SPED ed program and transportation. It's above a circuit breaker, above a threshold, pending resources. So for several years, the towns would get 45%, which is a real killer. Now, in the last fiscal budget, the one we're living in now, we did 75%. We did full funding, finally. We're going to do full funding again this year. I think there's a lot of support for that. I'm actually supporting a group that says, why aren't we doing 90? It's one of these, it's a killer for small towns. And the other thing I'd like us to look at, we've basically started to privatize SPED ed.
Yes.
And if you, in any other part of the country, the 15 towns around here would be one school system, and we'd be sharing centers of excellence, we'd be keeping kids closer to home, getting them the resources they need. Instead, some of them get, bust an hour to or whatever. I wish we'd look more at collaboration. Instead, we kind of leave every town to fend for itself, which is really challenging. There's been some progress on that, but I think we need to do better. But at least the resource piece slowly is starting to come into play, which should help. But those are big parts of the budget that are going to come through. I don't think we're hoping to not have severe cuts. I mean, there's always going to be debates about which programs are you able to sustain. But I think there's certainly concerns about what's going to happen with some of the state healthcare programs because of the severe federal cuts. I think those are still getting worked through. But hopefully we'll be able to hold on to some of them. Some of the rates are going up are outrageous and affecting lots of people who are on mass health. I mean, it's a lot of sort of bureaucratic issues that have to be dealt with along the way. But anyway, around the budget, I mean, that was, I'm supporting the 90%, which I think should help. And I also, locally here, just if I can have a minute on some local issues with the budget.
That was going to be my next question.
Oh, okay, so let's segue into that. So I had several constituents come to me and say, why, I mean, I know the senior has the van, which is great, but there's no public transportation for Millis.
Correct.
Even though it pays into the system, which I've never liked. We don't have the ride, we don't get that. So I talked with Bob Weiss here and Gazinski and the select board. They've been wonderful. They started having meetings. They started looking at exploring possibilities. I actually said I would put a earmark in for a share-a-ride or a dial-a-ride system that they have in some other towns around here. But even better, Millis is now going to be part of the MWRTA, and because of what we put in every year, we're actually going to be able to draw up those resources So the first year's not going to cost the town anything. The town's going to have a chance to look at what its needs are. I don't know what's set up yet because they just announced this, and I'm hoping there's going to be some meetings. What do residents want? What would be helpful? Surveying. I don't know how that's all going to play out. I'm certainly happy to help with that along the way. And so I've said I'm happy to do an earmark next year if we find, geez, we'd like to expand to this route, or we'd like to do more dial-a-ride, but it's going to cost us whatever it is. So I kind of flipped some of my earmarks, but I did put in one for Millis to continue the renovation down at the depot, the old town offices. I think it's still in discussion. The hope is to move the food pantry there, have a permanent home, if they want to. I mean, I'm not part of those discussions, but I'm supporting the concept. It's great space down there, and someday we'll get a rail trail here. I know there's some interest in it's beautiful.
I mean, your lips to
space.
God's ears.
Yeah, we were lucky in Holliston. God, there were meetings in my living room in the 90s, and CSX didn't realize how valuable the land was. So it worked out. It's a gorgeous rail trail. But that doesn't mean we still can't look at things, and hopefully will. But so those are just a couple things that we're hoping to do. And there's great town leaders here. I look forward to continuing to work with the town. Yes, there were challenges, but great sense of community here, and I'll be at Little League Baseball on Sunday, so that maybe that'll probably be after your show airs, but always good to support the community in any way that I can.
Are there any other issues that you've been focused on Beacon Hill this legislative session?
So, I because of my background in SNAP, we really need to fix that. It's a multi-billion-dollar program. It gets a lot of money into our local economy. We want to make sure people that are eligible are participating in the program. Right now, 3 out of 4 calls aren't being answered by DTA. That is a real problem.
Yeah.
And then also, even more important, or as important, we have a problem with our unemployment system. If anybody here in Millis applies for unemployment, give it a little time, give it a few weeks, maybe a month. But if you're not hearing back from them, please call me. I've had residents call me who haven't heard for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and they're depending on that check.
Yes.
It's to the point where I see it's a systems failure, and there's been hearings. I think there's actually going to be a commission to look at our unemployment system. It's set up to protect people. It's set up to get them on into the system as soon as they can. And I worry, and it's interesting, when we call DUA, they're very responsive, and then hopefully within a week or two they get people on the program. I worry about all the people out there who don't know to call.
Right.
So call me, and really for anything, any help with government. And if you're not sure if it's local, state, or federal, please write to me or call me. So my email address is james.arena-derosa@mahouse.gov. Maybe we can put that on the screen when I say that. And then they can also call my office, 617-722-2810. But again, maybe we can put that on. We're happy to help you if we can. Alex Trontos in my office is great, works all the time with federal agencies. I want to be a resource for people if I can help you navigate state government. And if it's local, we'll put you in touch with somebody here. If it's federal, again, we'll put you in touch with Jake Auchincloss's office. He's the congressman for Millis. But it's great to be here again. I really appreciate the time with you.
Well, thank you so much for dropping by. We really appreciate hearing from you and hearing all of the legislative updates. So thank you so much for joining us. And for folks at home, please send any questions you may have for our next update to Millis Community Media. That's at milliscommunitymedia@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Thank you.